My brother, Dr. John Jr., I see you. Tobias, I see you. Karibu sana. I think as we wait for the other guys to join in, our speaker and co-host, I think we can, in the meantime, have a recap of the discussion we had last week, which was still about mental health, cyberbullying, and depression. If you have been on Twitter active throughout this week, you will notice that we did a thread talking about the advice that therapist and psychologist Ruth Kimani shared about mental health, about cyberbullying, about depression. And if I can remember a few things off my head, one of the most important things that she mentioned that I can remember is that we can go through depressive periods, but that doesn't necessarily mean we are depressed. And I remember she emphasized that we have to seek, professional medical attention from a psychologist to a psychiatrist, to diagnose whether we have, clinical depression. I see Victoria Nkatha, karibu sana. We're waiting for 6 more minutes, then we can officially start. We're just having a recap of the discussion we had last week about still mental health. I think I'll add you as a speaker as we wait for other guys to join in. Thank you so much for making the time, Victoria. Yeah, so as I was saying, we also talked about um, the fact that I think there's a person who kept asking whether cyberbullying or bullying is a mental health disorder, but I think we've lost Victoria again. Hopefully, she'll be back. Yeah, but as I was saying, I remember someone kept asking, but we concluded that bullying in itself can cause one to have, mental health issues, and sometimes bullying can also come from someone being, mentally mentally pressed down, and then they, as a result, if they've been bullied, they end up transferring the same kind of torture. 4 minutes to go. My co-host, or our co-host, Irene Sumari, is having a bit of an issue, but yeah, Irene is finally here for you. We are happy to have you on the space. We're just having a recap of. I'm trying co-host Irene. Yeah, so Irene, we're just having a recap of the discussion we had last week. We have Victoria finally. Yeah, Irene, we're just having a recap of the conversation we had last week about mental health, and we've been sharing what you can remember and the advice. If you can remember something as well, you can share with us. But yeah, we're just picking out the most important things that we have to keep with us that we learned about mental health, depression, and cyberbullying. I think it's important to have that recap as we go into a bigger conversation this week that's starting in a few minutes. Um, yeah, Irene, you can share with us some of the things you can remember from the conversation last week, and how impactful you feel the conversation was. We start in about 3 minutes. We're just trying to wait for more guys to join in on the conversation. Once again, karibu sana, Victoria. Thank you for making the time. Irene, can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry I had issues with my phone, but yeah, as I remember, we had a discussion last week about bullying, mental health, and everything in general, and it was a really good discussion. And she tried to, you know, make us understand about the effects of bullying, what causes bullying and stuff. So I really, really, the thing is, we have the same topic this week, and I think this is gonna make us understand more about mental health. And
Sure. I think we've lost you, Irene. But yeah, so we start in 2 minutes. I think World Cup is distracting some people, but I think we shall start and then people can join in later on. The good thing is this is a recorded space, so people can always listen to the recording. Yeah. Yeah, so just to close in the 2 minutes, I think another thing, very important thing that was shared last week by Ruth Gimani was the fact that we usually look at therapists or as people think they only have to go to therapists when they're mentally sick or when they have mental health issues. But I think she mentioned something important that you know we shouldn't only go to therapists when we think we're sick mentally, but we should also visit these people, for things like confidence building, for things like, awareness about, yourself mentally and also emotionally. But I think on a larger extent, still, I think she talked about the fact that we have to be self aware and we have to find coping skills, because challenges are always going to be there. And usually mental health or depression or depressive periods usually come from the fact that, we get through challenges and they get overwhelming and, we fail to find the balance psychologically and emotionally. So I think, yeah, finding these coping skills, being self-aware can do a lot to help you with your mental health. I think, we should be starting. It's 10 minutes past 8. Um, we'll do the introduction. So this is the EAT space. The EAT space is the people space hosted by Samari and myself. And we're just ordinary East Africans having conversations about social and economic topics shaping the future of East Africa. And mental health is one of those social topics that is really important. It's a big conversation, especially in our time. If you're not functioning well mentally, then it affects every other aspect of your life. So some people look at mental health as something unserious, but it is a very important aspect of our lives because we're driven by our minds, our brains. They need to be functioning properly for everything else to work. And yeah, that's why we're having this topic on the EAT space and joining in on the mental health awareness. And my name is Frederick Kaskazini. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm passionate about East Africa and Africa. And I'm very glad to be part of this conversation tonight. And I hope to learn a lot. And I hope to leave this place knowing more about mental health and the topic. Irene.
thank you, Frederick. My name is Irene Sumari. I'm also an entrepreneur. Um, I I and Kaskazini came together to form this space. It's a free space for everyone to air out their views about different issues, based on economic, political, social, or any part. So it's a free space for everyone to come and share their views, but also it's a learning place for everyone to come and learn new things. And yeah, so welcome everyone to this space as we welcome Victoria to take us through the whole conversation. I would like to welcome everyone and recognize everyone who has joined the space. Thank you, everyone. And as I think we'll just continue the conversation as everyone tries to join the space. So yeah, let's. I think Kaskazini, we can now begin the conversations.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's go
So
to the topic here.
thank you, Irene. So Karibu, Victoria. I think if you've been looking at the posters, we know a bit about Victoria by now. She's a mental health advocate and founder of Responding to Life, which is doing a fantastic job in raising mental health awareness and really trying to, spread out the positivity and trying to help people think better and feel better. So, Victoria, I will invite you to do your personal introduction. And as you do that, would also request that you answer 2 questions. Please tell us your story and how you ended up being so passionate about mental health and what the journey has been so far. We believe that that kind of story and that kind of introduction can do something to inspire someone out there, especially young East Africans moving forward. Karibu, Victoria.
Thank you very much, Philip, and it's been lovely to be on this space. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Victoria Nkatha from Kenya. I'm a mental health practitioner, advocate, and I also am the founder of Responding to Life, which is a mental health organization that deals on responding to life as it says instead of reacting to life. So, a bit about my story. I started out understanding mental health when a close relative who I stayed with had maniac depression. And this would mean he would react in very, very different and, uh, for lack of a better word, absurd manners that would cause him to be extremely violent. Now, after a few moments, this would change and he would then go back to normal. But this was something that we experienced, and up until it got to a point where he pulled a trigger on a gun and it wasn't loaded. But now imagine if it was loaded. So, this is when I started to understand a little bit about mental health. And after, the doctor diagnosed him with maniac depression, then we understood his behaviors and were able to handle him at his level. So that's where my story with mental health comes from. Of course, it has also been an up and down journey where I've also had experiences with low mental health. This happens to everyone, and over time, I couldn't understand how to deal with it. But when I finally dealt with it, I started helping other people because I think it's very crucial. This has been happening for 6 years now. I've been working with Responding to Life for 6 years now. It's very crucial for us to understand that there is no health without mental health. That's number one. Everything about your physical health, everything about your spiritual health, everything about who you are comes from your mental aspect. So this is very, very important, more important than people think. Therefore, I started out with mental health, and ever since it's just been a glorious journey of which we've seen favor and grace from above, of which I'm very, very grateful for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really a touching and inspiring story, and especially why your inspiration for mental health comes from. But just another question: how has the journey been so far as Responding to Life, a mental health organization? We don't see many of those out there. We usually see normal NGOs, but yours particularly dealing with mental health. How has the journey been so far, and how much impact have you been able to see through the work that you guys are doing?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. It has been an uphill journey. Why? Because mental health has not been of importance until after COVID and during COVID as well. So for some of us before COVID, because I started in 2016 actually. So before COVID, it was hard to tell people that listen, you have to take care of your mental health. You have to take care of your mental health because everyone is feeling like, you know what, we all go through struggles. We're okay, cool. These things happen. In I think 2018, there was a documentary with old men who were dying by suicide in an area in Kenya, and then it's all of a sudden now started dawning on people, okay, this is important. Then COVID hit in 2020, and then now people started talking about mental health more, upfront, aggressively, and more aware. So this is one thing that number one was a good thing, and at the same time it was a bad thing. A good thing because we're getting to hear more about it, a bad thing because now, because everyone's talking about it, there are people who are also spreading misinformation and coming up with ways in which they will um, lie to people or misuse mental health. Some are outsourcing funding in the name of mental health, and these are things that are not really good. But the upside is that we're all getting the awareness. People are learning now how to take care of themselves, how to love themselves more, how to also stay positive. And I think that's one of the most important things. That is why I focus a lot on dealing with mental health in an aspect of handling situations and responding to life, because the most of the factors that affect mental health are the issues that come with life. So once you teach people, or rather you help people deal with life in a positive way, you then realize that mental health issues lower and they lessen. So that's one of the things that I do. So thank you for that.
Thank you. You mentioned something about personal, mental ups and downs. I'd like to understand, and I think everyone on the space, we're talking about mental health, and we usually talk about it from a perspective of people having mental health issues. But what does it look like for a person to have a stable mental health state, being in the right mental health state? What does that look like? And is it normal for everyone to have, some mental issues at some point?
Well, it's the same way as asking if you get a cold, you can catch a cold once in a while. Of course, the same way physical health goes up and down is the same way mental health goes up and down. The same way physical health can vary from, you're 100% healthy to you have a cold, to you have a broken leg, to you have cancer, to you have, the severity is different, and the longevity of what you're dealing with is also different. So there are people who have mild issues, which are probably stress caused, and not exactly. For instance, you see maniac depression or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, or all these other mental health disorders. It normally is probably the mild aspects, stress and mild depression that is caused by maybe a traumatic experience in your life, or something that is not going well, the loss of a job, and so on and so forth. So there are different levels of mental health concerns, issues, and disorders, as you may please. But for it to get to a disorder level, the same way chronic diseases, there's a certain level that you get to, that you're now determined this is a chronic disease, or this is a disease that is super severe. And for some it just might just be a common cold, while for others it's pneumonia, right? So that's the same way with mental health. Nobody has a stable mental state. There are days where you're gonna be sad, where you're gonna wake up feeling gloomy, you're gonna wake up feeling some type of way. Experiences will happen in your life. You could be dealing with grief. Grief is a mental health concern, because grief comes in and it messes you up completely, and that's a mental health concern. It's not to say that you're mentally challenged or you have a disorder, but grief is part of mental health, because it affects your mental health negatively. You have the loss of a job that could cause stress and depression. You have the loss of a child that could cause stress and depression. You have the loss of a parent, or maybe a business going down, or you failed an exam, and so on and so forth. There's so many aspects to life, and because we cannot avoid these aspects, same way you cannot avoid getting sick at one point or another. You cannot avoid a common cold. You cannot avoid, hurting your finger. You cannot avoid bumping your toe on the table and then hurting your little toe. That also is part of that pain that you experience, is part of your normal life. In the same way, this is why it's very important for us to advocate for us seeing mental health in the same light as we see physical health, because it's part of us. Why is it we don't get so concerned, or we don't get so worried when it matters, or we don't stigmatize common cold, right? But we get so, oh my god, this is something, when we are talking about mental health. So those are the reasons why we do what we do, because we need to shift that stigma and make it something that we can all relate to, and understand that mental health is part of you mental health is health, just like physical health is health. And in as much as you go to the gym, you exercise, you also need to take care of your mental health by practicing self-care, practicing, responding to life literally, and all these other things. That's how you help your mental health.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Think I want to know what are some of the uncommon mental health disorders. Since you said mental health can be helped, but what are some of the uncommon mental health disorders that people should pay attention to?
Whether they're uncommon now, because again, we've gotten so much awareness when it comes to mental health. We have very, very many disorders. We have, again, bipolar disorder, right? We have schizophrenia, as I mentioned earlier on, which is what people term as mad. And these are words that you need to also be careful by using, because schizophrenia has symptoms like those of the individuals who run in the streets. They hear voices, they are propelled by something within them, and so on and so forth. And these are things that people need to learn how to term the terminology. Bipolar disorder, there's extreme bipolar disorder. And again, this is also another one that is very, very similar to the ones that you see in the streets. They could really, some of them have so much energy, and they could really go from, being in a conversation like this to just acting drastically, and behaving drastically. So there are levels to bipolar disorder. So it's not something that, you just see, or you think that somebody has two faces and so on and so forth. Some of these cases are very, very serious. There's bipolar disorder 1, there's bipolar disorder 2. So go read up on that. These are not rare. It's just that they're not talked about, and people don't recognize them as much. There are there are very many syndromes, and there are phobias as well, which are things that people do not talk about a lot. So phobias, I don't know if you've heard people talk about how they are scared of certain things, and these are actually phobias, and mental health disorders. What else? I think much of it are things that we do not know of. Others, I would get very, very technical, but it would take a very, very long time to explain. They're very, very rare, but psychological disorders are, we have so many, so many, and it's very, very important. There are categories of them. There are trauma and stress related, there are bipolar and related disorders, there are anxiety disorders, and all of these categories have their own different levels and degrees. There are neurodevelopment disorders, which is what we see a lot in children, and so on and so forth, ADHD, autism, and so on. There is this dissociative disorders as well. So these are amnesia, these are identity disorders, and depersonalization disorders. So this could be people who feel a sense of unreality. They disconnect from their own self. They disconnect from their own feelings. They disconnect from their own memories. So again, we go back to the whole aspect of the individuals you see maybe talk in third person, who completely disassociate themselves to themselves, take on a different personality, and they just do not behave like themselves, or do not recognize themselves as themselves. So these are also things that a lot of people take as if people are, again, for using this word, and it's very, very important that you learn the terminologies. And I hate when people use this word, when people call people mad, right? It's not because people are mad. There's nothing like mad. It is about people having certain disorders that make them behave in a certain way, that needs to be, you know, diagnosed so that they can be able to find the right cure. So again, you see all these symptoms within people. There's a lot of our grandparents, especially in our African culture, who suffer from amnesia and there's another one that I'm forgetting. Oh, this old age amnesia. I can't remember it, but there's a name for it. And we don't realize it. We just think our grandparents are being very annoying. But no, some of them keep asking because they cannot remember. And these are things that we need to realize and really get educated on. So yes.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I wanted you to share us with the knowledge on PTSD and how bad it can affect someone. Yeah, we want to know about it.
Okay. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and often comes from, people who have experienced or gotten exposed to really traumatic experiences. We see a lot of PTSD in military soldiers, and this is because they get to experience death firsthand: bombings, shootings, killings. Some of their people are killed right in front of their eyes. We also experience a lot of PTSD with rape victims because of the traumatic experience that comes with, seeing or being raped. Even for those who even witness it, some of them, relive those experiences. And what happens is that you keep reliving and re-experiencing the experiences, not in just a way of memory, but in a way of, in very, very extreme cases, it takes over your emotions, that you get to feel exactly what you felt in that moment. You get to see what you exactly saw in that moment. And with PTSD is that the smallest things that could remind you of that could take you back there. So, for instance, if it is a dress that someone was wearing while they were being raped, it could really just make them constantly re-experience that whole ordeal. With soldiers, maybe going to a place or hearing the name of a place that they experienced that their friend got killed in, or they experienced a child being, killed or bombed or something like that. The moment they hear or associate with a certain city, then it makes them relive that experience again, which is quite unfortunate. So that is the short version of the explanation of PTSD.
Thank you, Victoria. If you've just joined the space, we're talking about mental health, fear, anger, and so far we've talked about some of the disorders, and we are continuing the conversation. There's something that you mentioned as you explained, Victoria, and I think when you say the word mad, I actually think that's one of the reasons why people try to push away mental health issues, because no one wants to be called mad or seem mad. But my question is just on what you had explained. Um, the people that reach that extent of, they cannot control themselves anymore, and they're actually called mad or something like that. Can it come from? Does it come from particular mental health disorders? For example, you talked a lot about bipolar, or can it even come from like anxiety or depression, and it gets so extreme that someone now totally gets to that level that you talked about, that they will be called mad?
Yes, as I explained before, and again, this is why I stated it is important for us to be very, very careful with the terminologies. The same way we do not say committed suicide anymore. We say died by suicide, right? So for it to not be, number one, criminalized, for it to also not seem as if, this was, I committed, when I commit a crime, right, I should be punished for it, and so on and so forth. So we say death by suicide or died by suicide. Now, going back to the question, there are so many disorders that could make someone, again, quote unquote, be termed as quote unquote mad, right? We also discussed maniac depression initially, where I had an experience with a family member who had a type of depression that made them behave erratically, that they went on to having to pull a trigger of a gun in front of us on my head. But for us, luckily, it was not loaded, and they had to get called by the police, and then they had to, dispose of um, all these weapons that they had, right? So that they do not cause harm to us. So in the period of the maniac depression erupting, they would behave um, well, there's nothing like normal, but for lack of a better explanation, not normal, right? They would behave very, very erratically. And then after a few minutes, they will go back to themselves. Now, for someone who does not understand this person, you would term them as quote unquote mad. And this is why this is very, very inappropriate. There's a reason why people do not want to see therapists, people do not want to see go get diagnosed. People do not want to go check on their mental health because they do not want to be stigmatized and called mad or crazy and all these words that are very derogative, right? When it comes to matters mental health. So there are several, to answer shortly, there are several disorders. However, personality disorders are primarily the ones because it personality disorders really affect how you behave. And whereas when you talk about anxiety and depression, it's more fears, it's more sadness, and not only sadness, but extreme happiness, and so on and so forth. You're not behaving out of yourself. It's just an expression of um further you, if that makes sense. Whereas with personality disorders, it completely you become another person with some of them. With others, it's a whole extreme, which is why people term them as this. And this is why these words need to change when we're discussing matters mental health. I keep on emphasizing everywhere that I go that we need to change our terminologies because that is what makes people not speak up. Somebody will not come and tell you, hey, I am hearing voices in my head. And you look at them as if and they're out of this world, or you term them as crazy, or you term them as mad. This is not the way to go. Instead, check on them and try to understand. Okay, so what are you hearing? And then go seek someone who can be able to help them diagnose what it is they're going through, so that they can get the help they need, rather than calling them crazy, calling them mad, or terming them as these very, very horrible statements, which now makes it even worse because these are individuals who need help, and instead of getting the help they need, they now avoid the help. Things get worse, and they end up either dying by suicide or running away, like the ones that we have seen. um thank you.
Um, Thank you. I just wanted to ask, do you believe that people can become mad out of rituals and traditional witchcraft? Or how is that related to mental health?
Spirituality and mental health is a very 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 big topic. um I think, to be honest, now this is coming from someone who's very, very spiritual in terms of matters Christianity, and I try as much as possible to be very, very rational with this because it is very, very important, even as people who are believers, to understand that the same way I would go to a doctor and I pray as well, when I am ill, is the same way I need to also go to a psychologist and also add on top of that prayer, so that I can get healed, and so on and so forth. So now, going back to the question, do I believe whether people can um, spiritually get attacked to now cause mental health issues? From a spiritual aspect, yes, I do believe so. Um, Evil runs everywhere, and it's not exempt of mental health. I do believe that, and that's a whole different conversation. To be honest, that's a very, very different conversation. When it comes to, witchcraft and so on and so forth, that's a completely different conversation. Um, from a mental health perspective, we need to also understand that not all mental health disorders are derived from spirituality and spiritual aspects. This is why we need to have the church understand that not mental health disorders do not necessarily mean that you need to cast out demons. It may be a factor. However, that is what is making us not have people get diagnosed, because we believe that all mental health disorders are as a result of spiritual evil and so on and so forth. No, there are concerns when it comes to some mental health disorders, neural functions, and these are things that happen in the brain the same way we get blood clots. That is not a demonic possession. The same way we get hurt, that is not a demonic possession. It is an issue with your body system. And the same way some mental health issues are caused by neural dysfunction. Go back to amnesia. There's something, I can't remember which part of the brain that is affected when you have amnesia. But that is something in the brain. It's not a demonic possession, right? However, again, I am not disclosing the fact that some cases are usually affected of that. But it is important to seek necessary help, that you get diagnosed so that you can know what is the proper issue, so that you can be able to move forward. But it doesn't help to stop everything simply because you think it's everything is spiritual. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Victoria. I think someone wants to ask a question. You're going to be allowed to ask the question, and I think anyone else part of the conversation, you can still request, and you'll be allowed later on to ask a question. But before we get to the question, I'm going to allow you after I ask this question. Right now, so many young people, getting done with school at different levels of their lives. There's so much social pressure that comes in. Everyone wants to make it, everyone wants to get somewhere. Yet there's a lot of like stuff around that just puts them down or gets them into depressive periods and all that. You talked about something from your organization, Responding to Life. I think you said responding to life other than reacting to life, something like that. I think you repeat that. But what are some of the things you can advise for? Because you also talked about the fact that everyone is going to have those ups and lows mentally. What advice can you give for people, especially young people, dealing with these social pressures and disappointments and stress? What advice can you give to them to deal with these situations for them not to fall into depression or serious mental health issues? Thank you.
I'm gonna start out by laughing and saying, I cannot come and kill myself because of social media pressure. Now, let me say this. I read something, and it's very, very interesting that you're asking me this question today, because I read this today morning. I'm going to quickly read it. And I think this would be the best answer to this. I wouldn't have formulated, I would have probably said this, but I wouldn't have formulated it as well as this lady formulated it. She said, the worst thing that was brought about by social media is that people no longer want to go through the stages of life. 23-year-olds want to have the same lifestyle as 33-year-olds. They want to afford the same things. And when they can't, they think they have failed in life. I think that's one of the reasons as a lot of people want to date older, because older people have been working for a few years, can afford to take you on luxury vacations and buy you expensive gifts, while your age mates can't afford all these things because they're still young. Social media has blurred the lines and made us forget that there are stages in life, and it's normal to be broke and have broke friends, broke girlfriends, broke boyfriends. Now everybody wants to live a luxurious lifestyle, and when you can't afford it, you think you're a failure. The most dangerous thing is people are selling their souls, putting themselves in harm's way to maintain a lifestyle they cannot afford, not because they could never afford it, but because they want things now. They don't want to go through the regular stages of life. And I find this very vital. Why? Because we're having situations of which we're getting so much pressure, we're getting so much, we're seeing so much. Somebody would look at one person here, you could look at your friends and think that I could look at Mildred, and maybe Mildred has 100,000 Kenya shillings, or other thousand Kenya, 1,000 USD hair, wig or wave on her head. And my concern would be, why does Mildred have that 100,000 USD, or rather 1,000 USD wig, and how is she affording that? And that would make me now worry and get concerned, not even knowing her journey to how she even got that wig on her head, right? And maybe Mildred is much older than I am, or I am just starting, or I'm just moving from somewhere, and so on and so forth. People do not want to go through the normal stages of life. People no longer want to handle life at its own pace. And again, we go back to the aspect of, we no longer are content and grateful for our lives, because we have accepted the fact that what we see on social media is reality. However, that is fiction. Nobody will post their bad day. Nobody. Nobody will post when they're down. Nobody will write that they're down. Everybody will be writing, or even I do that. I mean, if you think that I got my life all together, trust me, I don't. And I always say this online. I do not. Somebody told me, you seem to have your life all figured out. No, I don't. I am still trying to handle it, and the little that I do is what you see out here. But on the heavy days, you do not see the heavy days. You do not see the majority of the days. And once this sinks down in our heads, then we'll realize you're living life on your own pace. I live, and I think this is one thing that I know I do. I live life on my own terms. I do not care about what the other person is doing. And this is the one thing that you need to get to. An advice: if you do not take anything from today, take this one: do not be concerned about anybody's life at all. Do not. You will only be putting so much stress and concern. You're looking at somebody's greener pastures or greener lawn on their front yard. You do not know about their backyard. You're only seeing their front yard. You're only looking and thinking that the grass is greener on your neighbor's lawn, but you're not seeing the backyard. Maybe the backyard is completely a mess. Maybe even that front lawn is fake grass. Maybe that front lawn is a carpet grass. I'm not saying that everybody's life is horrible. No, that's not what I'm saying. However, what I'm saying is, focus on your own grass. Water your own grass. Grass grows where it is watered, and your life will only move if you water it. If you do not take anything, please take this today. I learned this the hard way, and trust me, I do not care what anyone tells me. I will tell you that, hey, this is my life, this is how I'm living. I am not embarrassed of my hard times, because that is life, but I will not set myself up for failure because I want to keep up with anybody. I do not want to keep up with anyone in this life. I want to keep up with where God wants to take me. And as long as I'm doing better today than I was yesterday, and I know that I'm headed towards the right direction, that is enough for me. I will be content today if I'm eating ugali, skuma, and fish, or even without fish. And tomorrow, if I'm eating at Panari Hotel and Kempinski, I will still be happy. If today I'm driving uh a tuk-tuk, or I'm walking, or I'm taking a matatu, and tomorrow I'm driving a Mercedes, I am happy. That's, I am so content. And those are the two key things in life: contentment and gratitude. If you live your life every morning being content with who you are, being happy about who you are, and being grateful for what you have, no matter what, if it's that 1,000 you have, or if it's 100,000, gratitude takes you a long way. It would help you not look at any other person. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Victoria. That was very, very powerful. And just before Tommy, the illuminator, comes in, I think I just realized something. I just spoke there. It's even hard to ask for help, because I just look at my own life. Sometimes it's hard to ask for help simply because feel like everyone has got it figured out, and how can you be the one who hasn't yet got it figured out? And I think that also goes to when we have mental issues or challenges, we can't speak about them because you feel like, how will people look at me? So I think that's a very, very powerful message. Thank you so much. So Tommy the Illuminator, you could ask your question, then we can move. Tommy, can you hear me? Ask your question. You've been allowed to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I guess my network was breaking. It. What's the question again, please? Anyways, nice to be here. First of all, I must say that I was listening and I've learned a lot. But let me know what's the question, please. Hello. Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We
Yes.
thought we thought you had a question to
Oh,
ask.
oh,
Do you
oh,
have a
oh,
question
oh.
to ask, or you have something to say? Okay.
No, I do have something to say. I do have. Okay, let me first of all say that I'm so happy about this space. I mean, it's so enlightening and insightful. A lot have been said that I resonate with, and based on a personal experience. Okay, my name is Tommy, and let me just say I at some point I was suicidal in my life. I attempted suicide once, and this was 3 years ago. So long story short, okay, thanks to technology, blind people can use phones, so I'm actually a blind person. But I wasn't blind. I lost my sight, and as a result, I became depressed. I lost my sight in such a terrible way to the extent that I had PTSD. I was robbed, and I was shot in the face by the armed robbers. They shot me in the face, and that's how I became blind. But to cut the long story short, the doctors told me, that I won't be able to see again. So that's where depression started for me. Sorry. I became depressed, and the depression led to suicidal ideations. In fact, there was a time I asked the doctor to inject me and let me die. Um, so it got to a time, after those attempted suicide, and also tried it once, successfully tried it once, but I survived. That's why I'm here. You know, I'm just listening to what have been said so far. It just tells that this is my experience. But one thing I came up to say is, this mental health for men, and one thing that always has always affected men is we are told to be strong, especially those of us in Africa. I'm in Nigeria. They told us while we were growing up, be strong, you're a man. When you fall, they tell you you're a man, but they don't tell that to ladies. They tell you you're a man, man up. That's the word, man up. And we have been conditioned to think in such a way or somewhat way that we shouldn't show weakness. Now, this affected me. Why? Because I didn't show emotions initially. I didn't cry. I kept on trying to tell myself that I'm strong. That lie they told me from when I was young, that I shouldn't be human. And I think it's when you tell a man to be, not to show emotions, it's almost like telling the man not to be human, especially when that man is going through grief, is grieving, or maybe he lost his mom. They tell you, oh, man up. you know Telling somebody to man up, telling somebody not to show emotions, is like telling the person not to be human, you know because we are all emotional beings, but society have conditioned us in this way that men are supposed to be sure. So it affected me initially. um Not until I started to cry out, healing started, and that was when I started to seek help. I didn't react. Okay, I didn't openly say that I have a problem, that I'm depressed, not until I started to cry out. So after like a couple of days, started to cry out. I started to show my emotions, and I must say this, that it's so therapeutic. There was this weight off my head, although I still was depressed. But that was where I knew I needed help, therapists, and all of those that I did, I let family in. I locked everybody out, put up my walls. I didn't listen to anyone. And I think family helps as well. People you love, people that care about you. As men, please let people in. That was one thing I, just came to say here. I just came to focus on the men because that could have taken my life. These lies we have been told from society and everybody that, oh, we are man, we are supposed to be strong. No. But to cut the long story short, even my girlfriend back then, I want to say relationships with the right people, really helps. My girlfriend back then married me as a blind person. I told her you can't be with me, and she said no, I'm not gonna leave you. I didn't meet you this way. Now we are actually married with 2 kids. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that let's just open up to people that care about us. Don't just hide in silence. Don't stay there. Men, please, let's just come out and just show that emotion. Let's be real. Let's be human. Allow yourself to be human. That you cry doesn't make you less human. I just came to focus on the men today because it's my experience, and if I didn't speak out, if I didn't say I needed help, I probably would not be here today. I wouldn't have healed from depression. So I just came to share this. Thank God for technology. Blind people use smartphones now. That's why I'm able to even share my story. So thank you so much for having me, and you guys are doing a great job. Thank you so much for holding this space. I yield my mic now.
Thank you so much, Tommy, for the story and the experience that you had during that time. We hope you're doing okay now. Guys, if you have any question, you can just request to speak. We welcome everybody. This is a free space. We welcome everyone to share their views, their stories, and see how we can help through these conversations. Karibuni sana.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. That's a very deep story, and I think everyone out here has been touched. Thank you so much for coming through and sharing what you've shared. I'm sure for especially the gentleman and the gentlemen in the space, I think they won't leave the same today. Thank you so much, and you've shared quite a lot that I think we can all learn from. Victoria just talked about contentment and gratitude, and I think what I also see from your story is contentment and gratitude, and that's powerful. Thank you so much. So moving on, I think Junior is requesting to speak, but I think just one of the questions I'll pick from what Tommy said. He talked about his girlfriend and staying with him and the relationship. Another thing that I think brings about a lot of depressive periods or even mental health issues is relationships today. And that's like a big thing that most people also don't talk about, but I think most people get hit sometimes even with PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, because of what has happened in their relationships. And recently I was talking to a friend who told me, she had a relationship in Namibia, and she was, dating this guy who later on turned very violent and very abusive. But they had some work they were doing together, so she couldn't leave the relationship, and she had to act like everything is okay. Because if she didn't act like that, then the guy would walk out of the business deal, and everything would crumble, and she would lose her job. It was connected to her job and the business. So she was going through violence. She was being mistreated. It was a lot, but she couldn't speak about it until she leaves the country, and she gets therapy and all that, and it affected her for almost 2 years because she couldn't open up to her family about it. She could only open up to the therapist when she later on met the therapist. So I think my question comes from there, Victoria. How can people deal with the trauma or the stress or the could be mental issues that come from relationships that are either abusive or bring about disappointment?
First things first, thank you so much for your story, Tommy. It is so amazing to listen to such people have such amazing spirits and also use their situations to empower others. Thank you so very much, and may everything in your life go in accordance to that which you have willed and that which God has willed for you. Now, how can people deal with relationships? Listen, relationships are some of the biggest factors that contribute towards negative mental health. Why? Because we're living in a society where relationships are very, very different from what they used to be. And one of the things that I normally say is that once your relationship turns sour and it becomes uh, abusive, especially physically, please just walk away. There is no going back from that. Mentally, spiritually, everything, verbally abusive, all of it, please walk away. There's nothing that would pay me to stay in a violent relationship. And I understand that this is not easy. It's easier said than done because a lot of people are supported by their perpetrators. A lot of people are dependent on their perpetrators. It's very, very important to also understand that as an individual, you also are an individual in the relationship as well. You're together, but you also need to keep some part of you as an individual so that you can be able to keep a level head when you're in a relationship. Some of us get into situations, and I have been in one that has been abusive physically. Well, it was primarily verbally, and then one day he lifted a hand on me, and that was it. I said, no, this is not it. And I should have read the signs from the verbal abuse. However, I didn't. And it got to where it got to. And I learned from that. Now, with learning from that, it has also helped shape my mentality and ideology when it comes to relationships and when they turn sour. It is also important to be your own person, that you're confident enough to say, hey, this is not something that I want to deal with. A lot of us are not comfortable in that aspect because we have not become so self-aware. This is also one of the reasons why I've responding to life, we focus so much on the self, on the person, that you're able to determine when things are not going well, when things are going well, so that you're able to say, this is where I stop. Those things are very, very important. So for me, when it comes to dealing with such relationships, the first and foremost thing would be to value yourself more than you value your relationship. I'm not telling you to be selfish. I'm telling you to guard yourself in the way that you would be able to depict when something is no longer healthy. Um, Number two, speak to someone. I know a lot of us usually do not talk to people, especially when relationships are going bad. We like to talk about them when relationships are thriving, but it's important to have someone who will have your back. For me, that's my mother. I know if I call her at 3 a.m., she's going to answer. She's going to sort me out. She's going to help me if I'm in a situation. She's going to find people, even if she's far away. She's going to find people who are around me to help me, to get me out of that situation. So always have someone who you can be able to call, contact, or send an SOS. I have 3 SOS contacts where I know if I click my phone, um, they can be able to help me in whatever situation. My phone automatically sends my location and tells them where I am. And then, yeah. So, also those features, knowing your environment and so on and so forth, it's very, very important to take care of yourself in such relationships. Um, when relationships also end, this also causes some type of grief season. And for this season, you also need to go through it. Don't ignore it. Don't push it down under the carpet or somewhere close in your heart. Deal with it and go through it. It's very, very important to go through your feelings, your emotions, and also to develop emotional agility. Emotional agility is the ability to handle your emotions without them having to drain you down or take you down. Emotional agility is very, very important to have. Now, the other aspect is when relationships are, um, I forgot what you asked about. Oh, PTSD relationships. Now, with such situations that you're reliving the horrible experience, seek help. It's very, very important for you to seek help and talk to someone, talk to a professional so that you can be guided and also assessed in where the PTSD has gotten to, if you need pills or if you need a weekly session or you need 2 week session, 2 weeks, 2 days a week in a session, in a for a session, or you need 2 monthly sessions, or whatever it is that you need. Find a way in which you can get a professional to help you so that they'll be able to properly and correctly diagnose you so that you're able to help yourself when it comes to dealing with PTSD from relationships. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for that. I think Irene has a question on anger and fear. I think we can take it from there as we try to also get Junior to speak. Irene, you can take it from there.
Victoria, I just wanted to know what causes harmful fear in among people, like most of the people.
Oh, what causes fear? That is such a broad question because fear comes from what we deal with on a life on a day-to-day basis. Now, this could be sorry.
Maybe I do something wrong or anything bad. I usually had a problem with fear. I become afraid. So I was asking, how can someone overcome or conquer fear? How do we go through about fear? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Josh. So I'm gonna combine these two questions and answer them in one. So, number one, fear is an emotion that comes from you feeling threatened. Now, this could be from phobia, as we talked about before, could be from a traumatic experience that you have had. Therefore, once associated to that traumatic experience, you feel threatened. It your brain feels like there's a trigger of a response, a fear response, in terms of your this brain part is called what? Amygdala. Yes. So that's where fear primarily is, the response to threats usually is impacted. So it sends a signal that this is danger, do not approach or do not go ahead, and so on and so forth. So basically, there are stress hormones that are triggered, that are released to you. And with this, there are several reactions. Now, overcoming fear, there are a lot of people who say that you have to face your fears. There are people who say that have to see the situations head on. But for me, I usually say that first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge what you're dealing with. This could be from acknowledging that, hey, I have this phobia. For instance, mine is snakes. I hate, oh Lord, Lord knows I have a fear for snakes. And this does not come from, me feeling the need to go and face my fear. I do not feel the need to go and face my fear. I do not want to do that. Will happen. But I acknowledge that this is something that is happening. And I embraced it. So, and now, with what you asked about, Josh, I cannot remember the exact situation, but also understanding that certain fears can be positive from, making us not do certain crazy things, like going to look at a snake face to face or playing around with snakes. Now, another thing would be, instead of looking at it from a threat perspective, it would also potentially be better for someone to look at it from a challenge perspective. You see, with challenges, is that you start looking at them from a whole different angle. You look at them from a point of, I am going to overcome this. I'm going to see this through. I am going to deal with this, right? Sorry, I'm in that country, so I'm going to see this through. I'm going to handle the situation. And that would be one of the ways you can be able to overcome fear. So acknowledge that you are afraid of something, accept, and then now gain the knowledge as to why you are fearful of that situation or that thing. And then now look at it from a challenge perspective. Think about, what can I do that can be able to help me overcome this challenge rather than overcome this fear? Because again, from looking at things from a fear perspective, you automatically develop a flee, or what is this terminology? Uh, fright, sorry, fight or flee, right? You automatically develop that. So you'd constantly have your guard up instead of looking at it from a perspective of overcoming. And this is where, again, we look at responding to life. Look at things from an overcomer's perspective rather than a fear perspective where it's a trigger, and help yourself develop skills in which you can be able to look at things from a very, very different perspective. However, again, I go back to the aspect of certain fears are good. It's not all fears that are horrible. It's not all fears that you need to look at from, I need to handle this. No, no, certain fears are good. Like my fear for snakes, I'm okay with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. I think as we close in, just two more questions. I think one will be on guilt and anger. Um, we usually have the terminologies. Some people are short-tempered, some people are long-tempered, and all. But if you could answer this, how do we know that someone's anger is not normal anger now? And there are people that struggle with anger issues. Yeah, are anger issues part of a mental health disorder, or is it something emotional? And then, when you look at guilt, people also struggle with guilt. I think also from Junior's question, I think also what he wanted to probably, because he said when he does bad things, he gets fear, but I think also what he gets is also guilt. Um, how does someone, how do we know that these feelings are not getting abnormal, especially with the anger? When do you know that anger that you have is not normal anger? And is anger something that's termed as part of a mental health issue or disorder? Thank you.
I think it is important for us to be able to decipher between emotions and mental health disorders. Emotions can cause mental health disorders. However, they themselves are not mental health disorders. And everyone feels angry, everyone feels guilty, everyone feels sad, everyone feels happy, everyone feels, these are part, again, we discussed emotional agility. It is important to have emotional agility so that you're able to handle your emotions in a way that they do not result to things like mental disorders, right? So, anger, if there's a vice that is very, very strong and can be very, very destroying, it's anger. Anger is a very strong emotion, and once you let it corrupt you, it can eventually cause harm not only to you but to other people as well. When anger becomes destructive, it is important to now check yourself and go handle your anger issues and seek help in terms of managing your anger. And these are things, again, we go back to the whole aspect of stigma and so on and so forth. These are things that often get stigmatized to a point where people do not want to handle certain things. But anger can cause depression, anger can cause, because anger can be triggered by anything. It could be me wanting something that I may not be getting right now. Remember, we discussed about how we as a generation want things right now, right? And if we don't get them, most of us throw tantrums. We throw tantrums, which can eventually cause a continuous feeling of lack, a continuous feeling of not having and not being satisfied, which eventually can cause depression, right? And these are things that we need to be very careful of. However, anger itself, joy, sadness, grief, and all these things, these are emotions. We need to remember these are feelings, and people feel. It's very, if you do not feel your negative emotions, you will not be able to prosper. Just a moment, sorry. Just a moment, sorry, my grandmother walked in. So it is very important to understand that you still feel, you're able to feel all these things. However, once they are unmanaged, that's when you need to understand that things can go wrong. And Frederick, I sent you a message, therefore I apologize. I need to go. I need to go. But
Sure.
yes.
Sure. Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate all the knowledge you've shared. I think as you go off, probably we could get one more story from someone in here and then we can close. But thank you so much for your time. I think we've all learned quite a lot. And hopefully we shall have another conversation with you next time. We can let you go now.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me as well. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
So as we wind up, I don't know if anyone has a story they want to share or a question they want to ask before we conclude the space. You can request to speak and we can allow you to speak. If we have no one, then I think one of the very important things I think we should take from here is gratitude and contentment. I think we're living in a very fast world. A lot is happening around us, and there's so much with social media, especially that you see every day, and it will trigger you or it will make you feel a certain type of way. But if you can have the gratitude, to appreciate where you are and the life you have and what you're able to do, and have the contentment, then and go through the stages of life like Victoria mentioned, I think we can have a better equation with the whole mental health. And also I think the other important thing that we can take away is Victoria talked about being aware that we all have mental ups and downs. You're going to have low times, maybe at job lows. Challenges are going to come up here and there, but you have to be able to be self-aware to know how to deal with that, and just talk to someone, keep the people around you that you love. And I think also, Tommy mentioned these, the love around you can do a lot to help your situation. So if we have no question or no one wanting to speak, I think we can conclude. This is the EAT space, just ordinary people having conversations about social and economic topics that we believe are shaping the future of East Africa and Africa. And we do this every Thursday. We talk about these topics, and just like today, we learn from one another, and we are able to go out there and try to be better people and lead better lives. Frederick Kaskazini, and we had Victoria Nkatha, mental health advocate and founder Responding to Life. Yeah, Irene, you can give your parting shots and then we can close the space.
Thank you so much, Frederick. I just want to remind everyone that it's important to take care of your mental health. It's important to check on yourself um, if you're working perfectly on your mental health. I think everyone has to be concerned more about their mental health, because nowadays people are more concerned about how they look, if they've gained weight, if they've lost weight, but we forget about dealing with our mental issues. So yeah, I think everyone enjoyed the conversation. And just to remind you guys, this is a very free space to speak. You can join every Thursday and you can be able to share out your views and ideas. Thank you, everyone that joined the space. I just want to say that We really appreciate, and karibuni sana, and have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. And just one more thing I forgot to mention on the space, you're free to express yourself in Swahili or English. It's for ordinary people speaking about the big things. So thank you everyone that joined in. Thank you for your time and thank you for sharing what you shared. Asante sana and good night.